future as citizens of the world, that's a great privilege and a great honor. So I thank you, and to all the people of South Africa. There is enormous affection and admiration for you in the United States, and I hope that I adequately express that during my visit.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. We'll now take questions. Zwandile Mbeje, SABC.
Warm greetings to both presidents. I will ask the questions to both presidents. Maybe starting with President Obama. You have come to Africa, to South Africa, of course, to boost and strengthen trade. So perhaps someone is saying, well, the United States is somehow threatened because there are other players who are coming to Africa, especially China. China is not only coming here in weight, but also in deed. So is perhaps President Obama not threatened that the leading role they've always played is in danger? And the other quick question, President Obama, South Africa's bid to UN Security Council, should it come, will the United States support it? A seat in at the UN? To President Zuma, you, as the leading voice, as President Obama has indicated, on the African continent in trying to bring stability and peace, we have seen some pockets of rebels, as you indicated, in Congo, in Mali, and elsewhere. So what sort of assistance, perhaps, have you asked from President Obama, I mean, as America is one of the advanced countries that can help in many areas? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm here in Africa because I think the United States needs to engage in a continent full of promise and possibility. I think it's good for the United States, regardless of what others do. I actually welcome the attention that Africa is receiving from countries like China and Brazil and India and Turkey, because number one, the more interest they show in Africa, the more tools we have and mechanisms we have to further incorporate Africa into the global economy, which has the potential of creating jobs and businesses and opportunity. So I don't feel threatened by it. I think it's a good thing. Now, I do think that it's important for Africans to make sure that these interactions are good for Africa. Because let me just take the example of natural resources. I think there's been a long history of extracting resources from Africa. You take raw materials, you send them to someplace else where they get used, processed, sometimes sold back to Africa. The profits stay there, the jobs stay there, and not much stays in Africa. Right? There's a long history of that. Well, the truth is the United States at this point, on issues of energy, for example, frankly, we don't need energy from Africa. Because of advances that have been made, we're seeing oil production and natural gas production, as well as clean energy production, all growing at a rapid rate in the United States. So our primary interest when it comes to working with Africa on energy issues has to do with how do we power Africa so that it can be an effective market, creating jobs and opportunity in Africa, but then we also then have somebody to trade with and sell iPods to, and airplanes, and all kinds of good stuff. So when we look at what other countries are doing in Africa, I think our only advice is make sure it's a good deal for Africa. Somebody says they want to come build something here, are they hiring African workers? Somebody says that they want to help you develop your natural resources, how much of the money is staying in Africa? If they say that they're very interested in a certain industry, is the manufacturing and value added done in Africa? Are they tolerating corruption that's not benefiting the people, but just benefiting a few at the top in their interactions with African countries? Those are the questions Africa should be asking. And hopefully one of the things that we can do is, in our interactions, as a country that doesn't have a colonial history here, as a country that has made large investments in development on issues like HIV/AIDS, hopefully we can garner some trust when people ask us, what are the kinds of development strategies that are going to be sustaining over the long term? But as I said, I want everybody playing in Africa. The more the merrier. I think that's good, and it gives Africans leverage, which I think is useful. But again, ask those questions. Don't just assume that folks come here and they're automatically benefiting Africans. And that includes the United States, Ask questions in terms of what we do. With respect to the United Nations, President Zuma and I discussed the fact that just as I wanted to institutionalize the G20 because it's more reflective of the world, I think the United Nations structure, which was created post-World War II, is going to have to be updated. How we do that, in what fashion, is complicated. It's difficult. And it involves all kinds of politics. I will say this, that an expansion of, let's say, the Security Council, in which the continent of Africa had no representation, would be odd. But how that moves forward is something that I think will involve a lot of negotiations and a lot of discussions. And the one thing that I share with President Zuma is everybody wants a seat at the table, but when it comes time to step up and show responsibility, sometimes people want to be free riders. They love sitting around the table deciding what to do, except when it comes to bearing the burdens, bearing the costs, sometimes sharing the blame for difficult decisions that have to be made. Then suddenly, I'm neutral. I'm non-aligned. Don't ask me to, I'm not referring to South Africa particularly, I'm just saying countries generally like the idea of being part of forums, but one of the things that the United States has done, and obviously we're not perfect, but our seat at the table comes by virtue of the fact that we bear a lot of responsibility. If there's a crisis in the world, people ask us, what are you doing about it? They ask, why haven't you intervened militarily? You're letting people die. And if we intervene militarily, they ask, why did you intervene militarily? They ask us to foot the bill. And the expectation is, why aren't you footing the bill? If there's poverty or crisis or a humanitarian disaster, the natural expectation immediately is, what's the United States doing? Now we shoulder that burden gladly. We think that's part of our responsibilities. We have been incredibly blessed. But the simple point I make, and I say this everywhere I go, is with rights come responsibilities and burdens. And it's not always comfortable, and you can't always make everybody happy. It's like being president of a country.
Absolutely.